I'd like to welcome you all today to our Healthcare Leadership Excellence podcast. We have a unique opportunity today. I've worked with our guest for years. I've listened to him. I hear his expertise in the inner C-suite, chief operating officer. Um, he knows his stuff. And our paths separated for a few years, but he came back on the radar and he's now part of an organization, and it's the Entrepreneurial Operation. Let's see, how do I get this right? Entrepreneurial Operation System. He'll correct me in a second. But what I want you to walk away from today with, listeners, is this: that today's somewhat of a mini MBA class taught by someone who really knows people, is great with people, and is also great with process. We're going to go through a lot today, and so this will be a listen to it on the treadmill, but it's also going to be a go back and take notes. One book you will want to get is the book Traction by Gino Wickman, because that is our textbook. I've gone through the book myself in preparation for this podcast, and it is delightfully basic and at the same time very detailed. The goal today is, as we learn from our guest, is to walk away with the idea that in your sphere, you can create your own operating system. Be an entrepreneur, take that responsibility. And to guide us down that thinking today is my good friend and colleague, Mike Urness. Mike, welcome.
Thank you, Carl. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
So, talk to us a bit again from your C-suite level. What interested you about this EOS? And set us up a bit on how our listeners listening to you right now can start to think already, wow, this could benefit me. Why did it? I mean, you had a ton of different things you could have chased after, but you chose this. Why?
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, I'd spent probably the last 25 years in operations in the trenches, working with business owners, and you know, big company, small company, but I mean Nike and some other firms. But most of my career and where my passion is working with small businesses. And about 3 years ago, someone introduced me to the book Traction, as you mentioned, written by Gino Wickman, and that book was written in 2007. Gino Wickman's a lifelong entrepreneur, and I picked up that book and I read it, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is everything I've been trying to do for the last 25 years. It's just been simplified in this book and connected in a way that I had not, and provided a roadmap that I had not had before. And so I think in my business, I had overcomplicated things at times. I had just made things harder than they needed to be. And so this book really was an aha moment for me. And then in my last company, I ended up self-implementing the entrepreneurial operating system, which is what he talks about in the book Traction. And the impact was so significant with the company and with the owner of the firm, and the impact on the employees, that I decided to do that full time. So that's how I got involved in EOS, and that's why I'm doing that today with different companies.
So, we're going to, I've gone through the book. We had our pre-call and we organized ourselves a bit, but just talk to us about what I wrote down in my notes, the 5 things. Talk to us about core values, why they're important, a core focus, why that's important, a marketing strategy, and especially for our audience, they might be thinking, what is a marketing strategy for me as a nurse manager? Um, Talk to us about what the book talks about, the rocks, and also issues. So that jumped off the page at me in the early pages of the book. Talk to us about why those are core to what you do.
Wow. Okay, that is a lot right there, Carl. That So what Carl's referring to is there's the EOS model is based on six key components. And if you think about it like a pie, and those are six slices in the pie, one of those slices is the vision component, which just relates to eight questions. Those questions are: what are your core values? What's your core focus? What's your long-term target? What's your marketing strategy? What does your 3-year picture look like? What is your 1-year plan? What are your quarterly 90-day rocks? And what are the issues that are holding you back from achieving what you want to achieve? So there's a lot there. And once you do it, it's a very simple approach, and it puts it on 2 pages, and you have that to share with people and be able to easily explain. So it's very simplified. The core values, the first question is absolutely critical because one of the other slices of the pie is the people component. And the core values are really focused on the internal organization and the type of people that you want to surround yourself with. And it is using those core values, and we try to keep that simple, no more than 3 to 7. And it's all about usability. It's not just core values that are generic core values. It's around what's unique about our organization that we want to attract those types of people and also repel the type of people that won't fit that organization or fit our core values. So the core values are just so important because they help you make sure you have the right people in the right seats. And you've heard that phrase probably from like Jim Collins, good to great. And the thing about EOS is most of Jim Collins, Patrick Lencioni, other amazing authors and business gurus, all of that was used and boiled down to its key components for EOS. So core values, that's why the core values piece is so important, because it is about having the right people in the right seats and using that as a way to make sure that you get those people, you onboard them, you train them, you speak to those core values. It's something week to week, and you use those core values. Um, any other
So
questions?
let me jump in here with
Yeah.
because I think core values falls into the same category as good listening. People hear that they need to be a good listener and say, "Oh yeah, I listen great. What's your next point? Oh yeah, I know values are important. What's your next point?" I don't want any of our listeners to take that approach on values here. It is the foundation. So, could you just give our listeners a couple? Now, again, the book is key. Please get the book. Mike's not selling the book. I'm not, and I do, full disclosure, I do have stock in Amazon, but you can buy it somewhere else if that's a conflict for you. What?
We all have stock in Amazon.
So, what about this values? How do I figure out what my values are? And
Well, it's really, it's interesting. I mean, we facilitate a process, and it's a great process. I love the process we walk through. What we do is we work with leadership teams. So the work Carl and I are talking about, think about it in terms of your key leadership team. That if you're a leader and you have 3 or 4 direct reports, think about that as your team. And is the getting that team together and going through the process of like, hey, who do we love working with in our organization? Who's an amazing employee? If we had 100 of them, we would take over the world. Who's that amazing employee? And we list those names of those employees. Okay. And then we go around and say, okay, well, why is that an amazing employee? What are the attributes that make that person so amazing? And then we list all those attributes. And then within those attributes are your core values. Okay.
nice.
And so we go through that process then of synthesizing that down to, the ones that are meaningful, that are unique to your organization. And so we go through a process like that, and then we kind of pressure test those core values with the leadership team. We use a tool called People Analyzer, where we just look at those core values and we see how do the people in the leadership team measure up with those core values. And if we're doing the process right, we're finding that they measure up well with those core values, we hope. But sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes there's someone who doesn't measure up well with the core values, and that might not be a great core value, or you might have somebody on their leadership team who's not the right person. And so we go through that process, and then we pressure test it with kind of the best employee where it should show that it's a great fit. And then we test it with probably the worst employee where it's pretty clear that that person wouldn't be meeting the core values. So that's how we go through the process.
Perfect. So I want to set up core focus with a short story from my end. Several years back, I'm working with a new CEO who has just left the land of being a CFO. The guy is brilliant. He's amazing. And we're getting ready for his annual meeting. And he comes into the room just grinning ear to ear, Mike.
Mhm.
And he has his presentation, and I do not exaggerate. He said, Carl, this is what we're going to go over at our annual meeting. And I looked it over. Mike, he had 34 priorities
Oh my gosh.
for that year. And
Oh my gosh.
he was bursting with joy. And he
Oh,
had it on a spreadsheet and he had data to back it up.
oh my
And
God.
he could read people very well. And he just saw my face was just, geez, how do I tell him this? That he's about 31 more than he probably should have. And I said, just tell him, John, I said, John, they're gonna drown with us. No, no, they're smart people. They'll like it. And it was a train wreck, predicted. So talk to us because the people you're talking to right now on this podcast, they are regularly drenched with the new priority. This is what we have to do. Many times it's the fated flavor of the month. Help help us here with how to determine the core focus or perhaps two or three of them. Talk to us on that.
Well, it's yeah, the core focus, and the reason the core focus is valuable is that once the leadership team aligns on, and this is all about aligning on these key questions. Once they align on it, becomes a filter that when something does come along, when that shiny ball does come along, you say, does this fit in our core focus? Because there is that temptation, right, to just jump into things without really thinking it through. And if you just kind of come back to that core focus and it helps kind of be that guiding light for decision making, it's so critical because it just keeps you on the straight and narrow and keeps you on your core focus. And the core focus, when we look at it, there's really two components to it. We look at it. One is the kind of your purpose, your cause, or your passion, and it's really the why you do what you do. And then it's also the other part of it is our niche. What is it we do that is really unique to us or to our group, to our subgroup or organization here within the hospital or within the healthcare system. So those are the two components that we just kind of facilitate that process through and people know it, they have it, and it's probably they just have it in their heads and they haven't aligned on it, and they all might have a different version of it. And we try to simplify this. I mean, Jim Collins, calls it hedgehog. It's a very mission vision. I mean, it's a very tough thing to get your arms around. So we try to keep it fairly simple and really get it down to a very short kind of statement that is pretty relatively brief that people can get their arms around because it's not only about the leadership team, it's really about that whole organization. So when you share it, you can speak to it with some passion and speak to why that's the core focus, and everybody can rally around it and get it and understand it easily. It's not a complex thing.
Yeah, and the reason I'm smiling here, Mike, is there perhaps it's a dark side of my personality, but I just sometimes when I'm in a meeting with a team, just to ask senior people around the table what their mission and vision is. And many times, even the senior people can't really remember what it is that they're about, what that corporate mission statement is. So again, being able to drill down like that is huge. So we're going to go talk about marketing strategy next. And I want to again give a short story as a context. I'm working with an organization right now, brilliant group of people that are slowly coming out of their silos. And the reason I was asked to work with them is because the head of the organization was concerned about how siloed his organization was. And so we did an exercise where they started talking a bit more about what their silos were. And as people walked away, they said, this was so valuable. I had no idea what Nicole or John or Harry did. And they've worked next to each other for years. And it was, Robert, I had no idea you were in charge of that. And Robert's literally told me later, how could you not know? And so when I read marketing strategy and traction, I know that many times a marketing strategy is for sales, but could you talk to us about how important a marketing strategy is for even a nurse manager who is running a labor and delivery unit and needs other people to know what her organization does so she can, or her unit does so she can dovetail better?
Yeah, it really is, people have to look at it like everyone has customers. These are just internal customers, you know, and internal stakeholders. And so it's really helpful to be able to explain to people kind of what you're about, what is your core focus area, what is it you do, who you do it for, what are your unique abilities and so forth, so that people understand that internally. And the marketing strategy we use is a very simple, simplified marketing strategy where we kind of focus around like the target audience, right? Who's your target audience, and understanding that really well. And then once you understand that, and we kind of get into a demographic and psychographic kind of target audience, and then we get into what are the three uniques about your organization that other organizations or other subcultures might have one or two of those, but your three together are what make you unique, and that is really provide the message around what you're sharing to that target audience. And so that is kind of the core of the marketing strategy. Is pretty simple, but it's really understanding what is unique about your organization and who are your internal stakeholders that you need to consistently and share that information with. So
And now we go, and that could be a whole podcast in itself. Because, and so let's dig in there a little bit more. Um, the people you're working with on this podcast are, for the majority, extremely brilliant in clinical. They have MD, BSN, MSN, DO.
mhm.
These people have multiple years post baccalaureate. I'm working with one surgeon leader right now, Mike, that had 14 years of training after college to be
Boy.
able to do what he's doing. And he will suck this book up because now he's running his own business. He's
Mhm.
running his own very successful business, but he's not been able to jump to the
Mhm.
levels he needs
Mhm.
because he's never taken a marketing class ever,
Right. Yeah.
ever. He can do highly technical, precise, amazing surgeries, and yet marketing himself. So, are there any, just other than Carl, read the book, any start points that this doctor could at least start with about how to market what he does so well?
Well, the key is that he and his, if he has other folks working with him that are part of his team, getting aligned on, first just really who is their target market? That's
Hmm.
the first thing. Who is their target market? Who do they want to influence? Who do they want to educate? Who do they want to bring along? That is the really key, because once you figure this out, once you figure out what is your target market, what are the three unique things about your product, service, organization, department
Hmm.
that that people need to know, then that again, it helps create a filter around your messaging and around consistency in what you share with people, because people need to hear things 7 times before they get it. And this helps keep it consistent and kind of keep it on message. And it also helps, again, it helps your leadership team be aligned on, hey, who is it we're going after, and what do we need to tell
Marvelous. We will come back to the seven
them?
times principle in this in a couple of minutes.
And by the way, Carl, just you mentioned the book Traction. For folks, for your readers, who Traction is definitely a how-to guide. It is a how-to roadmap. There's a sister book for people who prefer novels, that prefer
Oh,
visuals, and it's written in a novel form. It's called Get a Grip. So if people prefer
Oh, nice.
People prefer a business fable than get a grip would be their option, just so you know.
Okay. I know
Also,
Patrick.
also written by Gino Wickman.
Super, because I know Patrick Lencioni has a whole industry around the business novel, and
Yeah,
it resonates with a lot of people. So thanks for
yeah,
that other option.
yeah.
Talk to us about those essentials called by Wickman in his book, Rocks. I
Okay.
really love this. The 90-day priorities. Talk to us on that.
So rocks, just yeah, it's I don't want to go into the background why they're called rocks, but it's I think it was either Peter saying it or Peter or Lencia, Patrick Lencioni, that just just the rocks are the big things. They're the big things. They're not the pebbles. They're not the sand. They're not the water. That's all your to do stuff. That's all your tasks that every day fills up your inbox. These are the big things that you need to do over the next 90 days is your 90-day priorities that need to get done to move your organization forward. And so these are the kind of working on the business priorities versus the in the business priorities. These are the things that if you do them well, they are really going to pay dividends for your organization long term because they're just going to help you work smarter versus harder. So these are the top priorities for the next 90 days. Okay. And the key thing is that you don't take on too many. I mean, we work with organizations all the time, and everybody always takes on, like you said, your person had 34 priorities, right? That means nothing is a priority.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, we start with company, or it would be departmental rocks, or whatever the key rocks for that organization or sub department, whatever you're working in, the most important ones, 3 to 7 max for the quarter. 3 to 7 max. And when you start out, I'd say closer to 3. So, and then the key thing is that you write the rocks, you write those priorities in a way that is smart, specific, um, uh,
Measurable.
measurable, time bound. Uh, but what I get to, I'm not going to go through the whole acronym. What I get to though is you just got to be really clear on what done looks like. What does that goal line look like? And share it with your team and get 100% clear on this is what done looks like. Because at the end of the quarter, you need to go through and look back and say, are you done or not done? And done is 100% done. It's not 90% done. And so it's really critical that people get really good at writing clear, specific rocks with very clear, quantifiable end games. So,
So, and in our pre-call, Mike, you gave this great example of um, getting to the 7 yard line using the football analogy. Getting to the 7 yard line is great, but it doesn't put points on the scoreboard. It's great that Carl marched the team downfield from the other, 20 yard line,
yeah,
but no one ever put on a Super Bowl ring because they got to the 7 yard line.
yeah, yeah.
And so um,
Good.
I worked with one organization where we had quarterly meetings, and the quarterly meetings turned out to be completely useless because we'd be there in January and our next meeting was in April. Half of the April meeting was reading the minutes from the January meeting just to remind people what they'd agreed to at that time. And it was just, we looked at each other finally and we said, we've got to reorganize this. So, how do this nurse manager I'm talking about, and now remember, I come out of this meeting and I have my rocks. I've got my 90 days in mind. And my day turns into this vortex of emergencies and meetings. Literally, Mike, an organization I work with, some of their leadership is generally booked from 8 to 5, with maybe an hour or two in between with meetings. And I regularly look at that and think, how are you doing anything? You're in meetings 6 out of your 8 hours. 75% of your time you're in meetings. So talk to me, the nurse manager, as to how I keep this 90-day target. If we're talking right now, that'll be October the 15th. How do I keep October 15th in focus when I'm blitzed by day-to-day crisis?
Well, it does. We teach folks, a tool called Delegate and Elevate. Sometimes it's just figuring out if you look at that, all those small pebbles that are on your plate that are in the way of you focusing on this rock, what is it you have you have to make some trade-offs, right? So if you don't make these rocks a priority, and the thing is, we teach teams how to every week they check in on their rocks, and this is a big part of it. Every week they're checking on their rocks and they're reporting back to their team. So it's a team accountability. Are we on track or off track on that rock? And every rock has an owner. It doesn't have multiple owners, it has one owner. Okay. And it doesn't mean that that person's doing all the work. They just have to make sure it gets done. So there's other people working on it. There might be cross-departmental work, people involved with it. That person is just kind of where the buck stops with getting that rock completed over the goal line. And so we'd have weekly, just are we on track, off track? We don't, and if it's an issue, we will then drop it down to an issues list, which we prioritize and discuss those issues. But that person's responsible for that rock. And that's partly, peer accountability is a big part of it.
So let's link issues, which is the last one on our list that we started half hour ago.
Mm.
Uh, and I'm taking it all over the place here, Mike.
That's
Uh,
all right.
link me back with issues and the core focus. Those seem to me to have some tie. Am I off on that or?
Well, there might, some of the issues, the key thing about issues is creating a culture where people are comfortable identifying issues. That's a key. That's the number one step. So it's around people just being willing and open and honest and say, hey, we've got an issue here, and keeping a list of these issues, right? And some of those issues might be things that are impeding you from being able to stick to your core focus. So there's definitely a connection there. If you're having problems with sticking to your core focus, then there's issues. Okay. And so that, those become issues on your issues list. So, there's connections on that, and sticking to your core focus and executing against that can be a challenge. There can be, a multitude of issues related to that.
So getting back to your comment, delegate and elevate. Uh,
Mhm.
so many times I've heard, and again, another whole nother podcast on this one. Carl, I hear you talk to me about elevate, or delegate, but my people just consistently drop the ball. Carl, if I don't do it, it's not going to get done. So bring in the 25 years of COO, EOS. How would you respond to me if I were your client telling you that?
I would say that is hard to do. It's hard for all of us to delegate who are used to a certain level of, proficiency and execution and getting stuff done, right? We're all a little bit control freaks. And so it's hard to do. Number one, it's normal, right? It's very hard to do. Number two, I think you just have to learn how to kind of sort, look at your week and find those things that you're probably not great at, but you're still doing,
Mhm.
and start with those and just do one or two things, even a quarter. You just identify that list of things that you're just, just suck your energy, that that you're terrible at, that you need to start delegating. So it's not doing it all at once. It's taking one or two a quarter and just doing that in a regular fashion. There's someone else probably in the organization who can take that on, and for them it's a growth and development opportunity and something they probably love to do. And then it's just being really clear and sitting down with that person, say, I struggle giving stuff up, but let's just get clarity here on what success looks like for this item. Let's get really clear on expectations, and we can check in on that. And the thing about this system is it creates a structure and checking in and so forth, which provides some level of comfort, because there's metrics and things like that. So we're tracking these things and reporting on these things, so we know things are in control, which gives us the comfort, to delegate. It's hard to delegate when things aren't in control. If things are out of control, it's really hard to delegate.
So we talked a bit in the pre-call, and I don't know if I shared one of my favorite quotes from Steve Jobs, which is, I'd love my work if it weren't for the people." Uh, that was in his
Yeah.
early days, where he was just this tornado of creativity and didn't suffer people less genius than he too was.
Yeah.
We talked in our pre-call, Mike, about the phrase "people are messy." And
Hmm.
talk to us a bit, because again, like I said in your introduction, you're a guy that has just led at the highest levels, but you're also good with people. So talk to us a bit about how to work best with people. I loved your point in the pre-call about got it, want it, and capacity to do it.
Mhm.
Teach us a bit on how to help people be the best for themselves and also for the organization. Lots to unwrap there.
Well, it's I mean, it helps if you care about people being successful, and if you care about developing people, right? And so I think that's pretty critical, right? Especially if you're in a leadership role or in a mid-level manager role. There's probably nothing more important than making sure people who are reporting to you are successful, which means that they know what that success looks like and they have the resources to be successful and the direction to be successful. So, um, that is just that is a real critical piece to it. One thing we do with organizations is that we suggest that they do a quarterly conversation with their employees. That is a where you talk to them about their rocks. You talk about core values and how they're doing against those. It's just a learning. It's not a performance review. It's literally around checking in and making sure that there's a check in and alignment around how that person's doing and where they're struggling, where you can help. And some people you might meet regularly with folks like every week with direct reports, every 2 weeks or whatever. But this is a little bit of a deeper dive. This is not just a quick check in type thing. This is get away from the office, have a cup of coffee, go for a walk, whatever it might be. And it really is around trying to help that person deal with any obstacles that is keeping them from being successful. So that's something that we do. It's a very simple approach. It's a quarterly conversation, and it's a priority we try to have our leaders do.
Wow, that is excellent. Dig in a little bit on this because it just jumped out at me. Uh, wow, tell how to be a Mike just held
Right.
up the book. This is an audio, obviously. Tell
Yeah.
us about the book you just held up.
Well, this comes out. There's a whole series of books in this traction library. One of them is How to Be a Great Boss. Gino Wickman's a co-author of that, and this is the one that really gets into like quarterly conversations and how to do that in a way because performance reviews and things are so daunting for people and usually just not that productive. And this is a way to really focus on making sure that people are being successful. That's what it comes down to.
Give our listeners just one or two things they could do beyond that quarterly conversation to start turning their unit organization. We have people listening here that may have no direct reports. I know we have people listening here that have hundreds.
Mhm.
What's just one or two things that Carl, the new leader, could do today to start a change?
They just need to have an alignment discussion with those folks who, if they have people that report into them, or even if they have, maybe even stakeholders that don't report into them, but they rely on and that they collaborate with. And it is just that conversation around, it's just a simple conversation. Hey, what's working? What's not working? How can I support you?
Excellent. Talk to us a bit about what you mentioned in the pre-call about what I wrote down. Got it, want it, capacity to do it.
Yeah, when we talk about that slice of the pie, that people slice, we talk about right people and right seats. The right people piece is making sure that you have folks that are a good fit with your core values, right? So if you have those 5 core values and you've brought those to life and what those really mean in the organization, we have a simple, like I said, we have a simple tool called a people analyzer we use to kind of grade folks against really simply against those core values. The right seat piece of it is called we do this thing called GWC, which is get it, want it, have the capacity to do it. So we first go through the core values. Are they a fit for our organization or our department? And then we go into get it. Do they get the role? Do they understand what the role is about? Do they know what success looks like for the role? So they naturally just understand it. And W, do they want it? Do they want the job? A lot of times we'll assume, of course, they want that job, and end up surprised at how many times I work with organizations and we go through and work on this thing called the accountability chart, and we start putting people in boxes, and then we do this process around do they GWC the seat, right? Do they get it, want it, have the capacity for it? And sometimes someone will be like, actually, I don't want that role. And everyone looks at them, all their colleagues look at them like, what? We thought you loved that, and so it's a big aha moment. So do they want the job? And then the capacity part is, do they have the ability? Do they have the God-given talent for that type of role? And that might be the one where they might not have it today, but they have the raw skills, they have the desire, and they could develop into that role. And so generally we say that, hey, that has to be yeses across the board to be the right seat. And so sometimes, you have somebody that's great for the organization, they're a great fit culturally and fit the core values, but they don't GWC the seat. So is there maybe a different seat for them? Do they need some additional training? What can you do here? So that's how we use GWC.
I look at the wheel here in the book. We talked about vision, we talked about people, issues. Um, there's two parts here that I think send most people running to the hills. Um, People are messy, but data is absolutely intimidating for so many people. Um, I remember one person, I have this one organization that I work with, and they're just magnificent in helping medical professionals understand the spreadsheets and the finances behind medicine.
Mm,
And there was one person that she said, I was so grateful for this class because I've been a partner in my organization for years, but when people would dump the quarterly report in front of me, I
mm,
just hoped no one would ask me a question because I had no idea what it meant. And
mhm.
this lady has
Yeah,
an MD.
yeah.
So talk to us about how, as leaders, we can become better versed with data
Mm.
and how data leads into good processes. Help us out with those two areas of the wheel.
Well, that's it's in some ways it is the understanding your processes and looking at your core processes, and if it's possible to simplify and document those core processes. Because what happens is when you look at the core processes, you look at, especially if you look at areas where, gosh, at this kind of third step in this process is where it always falls. We go out of bounds. Or this is where we always have a problem. And then if you could figure out, well, how do we know we're having a problem? Is something not happening or is something not getting done? How do we measure that? It's really getting into, we try to use metrics that are weekly kind of activity metrics, not rear view mirror, financial statement, how did we do last quarter's metrics. So we try to use just really simple, how do we know we're being successful in these key areas? And so we try to simplify our scorecard and our measurables around things that are making a difference day to day, and then we track those. We always track those out for 13 weeks, which is a quarter, so we can see trends, and that's kind of the key is. And I think for people just starting with this, it'd be like, hey, it would be helpful to have some data. And sometimes people feel like, oh, they're going to measure me. Do they not trust me? And people that are, I think, trying to do a good job, we find that actually they really appreciate the metrics because it helps them understand the system better and also how they're doing. And until you start measuring something, you really have no idea. I mean, it's your gut, it's your emotion. You really have no idea. And so the metrics just help. I mean, it helps provide data, and it's hard to make good decisions if you don't have data. You know.
Absolutely. So, speaking as a teacher of EOS and
Hmm.
speaking as someone who has a quarter century, not to make us feel old here, Mike,
Yeah. Mhm.
but a ton of experience, that sounds better,
Yeah.
in the C suite and leading operations, how just give a couple of takeaways today if the Carls on this uh, episode take nothing more away from these one or two nuggets, what would those one or two must-haves be?
Um, I think you have to figure out how can you simplify things. So important. I mean, it just simplify things so that everything. I mean, there's so many things you take for granted at such a level of detail and complexity that most people can't get that in their heads. So I think the smartest leaders are the ones who can simplify things down so that they just make sense. They're somewhat intuitive, and people can get it easily. So I think simplify things really well. And I think the other thing for people is is to focus on alignment with the people they're working with. So, because they all have these different assumptions in their heads, and getting together at some kind of cadence where they can talk about these assumptions and just make sure they're aligned. Really critical to be aligned because it's hard for an organization to be successful when that energy is going in different directions. You know, so that alignment, just if you think about like a circle with a whole bunch of little arrows in it, and if those arrows are people or kind of the human energy in the organization, and if those arrows are going in different directions, I mean, it just you're not you're not going to bust out of that circle. You're going to be stuck in that circle. But if they're all going in one direction, I mean, you're going to move that. Get bust out of that circle, and you're going to move forward. So it's really,
I,
that's critical.
I, I love those two, align and simplify.
Yeah.
Please, for our listeners, sometimes when we hear something that basic, we think, oh yeah, doing that, doing that. What I need something more complicated. Please take time to focus on those two things. Again, we're talking to an expert that has a lot of time running really successful organizations. So, with that in mind, Mike, if people are saying, yeah, this really resonated with me, I'd like to get more from Mike, how do we get a hold of Mike?
You could, you can send me an email at Mike.Urness, that's spelled Urness, at EOSworldwide.com.
Okay.
So Mike.Urness at EOSworldwide.com. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn as well. So Mike Urness, Urness. You can check me out on there. I'm in Portland, Oregon. So that's the right Mike Urness.
Yeah, there we go.
um, yeah. So that'd probably be the best way to get hold of me.
And both of those will be in the show notes for our listeners.
Yeah.
Mike, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I think our mini MBA goal was just in simplify and align was,
Mm.
and I would really encourage our listeners, get a hold of Mike. I have known him coming on probably 15 years now, and he is solid to the core. Um, Completely, he's value driven, people based. Can't say enough. And Mike, thanks for sharing your talents with us today.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Thank you, Carl. I've always enjoyed our discussions. So it's nice to talk to your audience, and happy to take any calls or point people in different directions or provide resources or whatever they might need if this EOS concept resonates with them.
Perfect. Thanks again for being with us.